Breaking. Iran launches new missile strikes as U.S.-Iran war enters day 13. A comprehensive analysis of a rapidly escalating global crisis. The conflict between Iran and the United States has entered its 13th day, marking a critical moment in what is quickly becoming one of the most serious geopolitical crises in recent years. Fresh missile launches, drone strikes, and military movements across the Middle East have raised alarms worldwide, with analysts warning that the confrontation could spiral into a wider regional conflict if tensions continue to rise. Over the past 2 weeks, the situation has evolved from targeted military actions into a broader struggle involving multiple nations, global economic interests, and strategic military alliances. As new missile strikes are reported and air defense systems across the region remain on high alert, the world is watching closely to see whether diplomacy can prevent the crisis from escalating further. The latest wave of missile attacks. In the early hours of the day, reports began to emerge of several ballistic missiles being launched toward strategic locations across the Gulf region. Radar systems in several countries quickly detected the incoming projectiles, triggering emergency alerts and activating advanced air defense systems. Military officials reported that many of the missiles were intercepted before reaching their intended targets. However, explosions were still heard in several areas as debris from destroyed missiles fell to the ground. Thick smoke clouds were seen rising near industrial zones and infrastructure facilities, highlighting the ongoing dangers posed by the escalating conflict. These attacks appear to be part of a coordinated response by Iran to continued military pressure and strikes carried out by the United States and its allies. Analysts say the missile launches were designed not only to damage strategic targets, but also to demonstrate Iran's ability to project military power across long distances. The origins of the current crisis. Although tensions between Iran and the United States have existed for decades, the current conflict was triggered by a series of events that unfolded rapidly over the past few weeks. The crisis began when military operations targeted facilities believed to be connected to strategic defense programs inside Iran. The strikes were intended to weaken Iran's military capabilities and reduce perceived security threats in the region. Tehran responded almost immediately with missile and drone attacks directed at locations associated with U.S. military forces and allied infrastructure across the Gulf region. Within days, the confrontation escalated into a cycle of retaliation, with each side attempting to demonstrate its strength while avoiding actions that might trigger a full-scale war. Now, 13 days into the conflict, the situation has grown far more complicated, with regional allies, shipping routes, and global energy markets all becoming part of the unfolding crisis. Gulf nations on high alert. Several countries located along the Persian Gulf have found themselves caught in the middle of the escalating confrontation. Many of these nations host important military bases and strategic infrastructure connected to U.S. forces, making them potential targets during retaliatory strikes. Air raid sirens and missile alerts have become increasingly common in certain cities, forcing residents to take shelter during periods of heightened tension. Governments across the region have advised citizens to remain vigilant and follow safety instructions issued by emergency authorities. Even when air defense systems successfully intercept missiles, the falling debris can cause damage to buildings and vehicles. As a result, emergency services across the region remain on constant standby. The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz. One of the most significant concerns surrounding the conflict is the potential disruption of global oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean and serves as one of the most important energy corridors in the world. Nearly 1/5 of global oil exports pass through this route every day, making it a critical link in the international energy supply chain. Any disruption to shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz could have immediate and far-reaching economic consequences. Energy markets are extremely sensitive to instability in the region, and even the threat of attacks on tankers or ports can cause oil prices to rise dramatically. Recent reports of attacks on ships and infrastructure near the Gulf have already pushed oil prices higher, raising concerns among governments and businesses around the world. Economic and global market impact. The ongoing conflict is not only a military issue, it also has significant economic implications. Financial markets across the globe are reacting to the uncertainty created by the crisis. Energy companies, shipping firms, and international investors are carefully monitoring developments in the Gulf region. A prolonged conflict could lead to disruptions in trade routes, higher transportation costs, and rising fuel prices. Countries that rely heavily on imported energy are particularly vulnerable to price fluctuations. As oil prices rise, the cost of transportation, manufacturing, and electricity can also increase, potentially affecting economies worldwide. Because of these risks, global markets remain highly sensitive to every new development in the Iran-US confrontation. Diplomacy efforts to prevent escalation. As the conflict continues to intensify, diplomatic efforts are underway to prevent further escalation. The United Nations and several world leaders have called for immediate restraint and renewed dialogue between the two sides. Diplomats from various countries are attempting to mediate discussions aimed at reducing tensions and establishing conditions for potential negotiations. However, progress has been slow due to deep mistrust and long-standing political disagreements between Tehran and Washington. Despite these challenges, many experts believe diplomacy remains the only viable path to preventing a broader regional war. Humanitarian concerns and civilian safety. Beyond the political and military aspects of the crisis, the human impact of the conflict continues to grow. Millions of civilians living across the region are experiencing uncertainty and anxiety as the situation unfolds. Families in cities near strategic facilities or military bases face the constant possibility of missile alerts and emergency evacuations. Schools and businesses in some areas have temporarily closed during periods of heightened tension. Emergency responders and medical teams remain on standby, ready to deal with potential casualties or infrastructure damage resulting from missile strikes. Humanitarian organizations are preparing contingency plans in case the conflict leads to large-scale displacement or additional civilian suffering. Military movements across the region. In response to the escalating conflict, military forces across the Middle East have increased their readiness levels. Naval fleets are conducting patrols in strategic waters, while air forces maintain heightened surveillance of regional airspace. Missile defense systems have been activated across several countries, capable of detecting and intercepting missiles before they reach populated areas. The movement of these military assets signals that governments across the region are preparing for the possibility of further escalation, while hoping that diplomatic efforts will eventually succeed. Possible future scenarios. Experts believe several possible outcomes could emerge from the current conflict. Diplomacy resolution. International pressure could eventually lead to negotiations that bring both sides to the table and reduce military tensions. Extended limited conflict. The conflict may continue with periodic missile exchanges and military actions without escalating into a full-scale war. Regional expansion. If other countries become directly involved, the confrontation could grow into a wider regional conflict, affecting multiple nations and alliances. Each scenario carries significant risks and uncertainties, making the coming days and weeks extremely important. Conclusion. As the conflict between Iran and the United States enters its 13th day, the situation remains volatile and unpredictable. The latest missile strikes highlight the seriousness of the confrontation and the potential for further escalation. Global leaders, diplomats, and military strategists are all watching closely as events continue to unfold.
The choices made in the coming days will likely determine whether the crisis moves towards diplomacy and stability or towards deeper conflict. For now, the Middle East remains on edge, and the world continues to monitor one of the most critical geopolitical situations of the modern era.